The 57-year-old suspect in the killing of a state lawmaker and her husband has been caught and is now facing murder charges, among other charges. Investigators using helicopters, surveillance drones, as well as infrared technology to find Vance Bolter overnight. They say that he literally crawled to law enforcement after search teams closed in on him.
I'm very proud to tell you that we took the suspect into custody who is responsible for this. That was within 43 hours of the incident. There's no question that this is the largest manhunt in the state's history. Just down at the scene where he was taken into custody, there was 20 different SWAT teams over an extremely large area hunting this individual down to take him into custody. I believe that the state of Minnesota and certainly the city of Brooklyn Park should be extremely proud of the police officers within the city of Brooklyn Park, but the partnerships that we had are unprecedented between the federal agents, the county, the locals, and others around. It is absolutely an incredible task what went on. Essentially, the Brooklyn Park Police Department was turned over into an operations center, and that's all that hundreds of detectives worked on tirelessly for 43 hours. So while this has come to some conclusion where we've made an arrest, there is a ton of work that needs to be done. So I encourage community members, if there's evidence, information, or other things, please continue to feed that information to the Brooklyn Park Police Department so that we can fully investigate this and present a complete case to both the federal jurisdiction and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office.
And just into CNN a few moments ago, this new photo of Bolter. It's his mugshot after he was transferred to the Hennepin County Jail. He has been charged now with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree attempted murder. And that's according to a criminal complaint that was obtained by our colleagues at the Minnesota Star Tribune. A source telling CNN that the U.S. Justice Department is also considering possible federal charges against Bolter. The complaint also shows that police found weapons, including at least 3 AK-47s and a handgun inside his SUV. He's a suspect in 2 separate shootings targeting Minnesota state lawmakers in their homes. Melissa Hortman and her husband, they were both killed early Saturday morning. She was the top Democrat in the Minnesota State House. Officials saying that State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were also shot, but they survived the attack and are recovering in the hospital this morning after undergoing surgeries. Let's bring in now CNN's law enforcement analyst, Jonathan Wackrow, who's also a former Secret Service agent, joins us live from Middleton, New Jersey. Jonathan, it's good to have you this morning. Thanks for getting up early for us.
Hey, good morning, Paulo. How are you?
Following and still processing this overnight news, I'm wondering if you can give us a general sense of this vast amount of technology and the manpower that was used to track him down without injuring either him or any officers.
Well, listen, there are 3 things that are credited right now for this successful apprehension. First, it's the proven law enforcement tactics that were deployed. I mean, you were thinking about a surge of law enforcement, the coordination between state, local, and federal assets working in unison under one central command to follow up on hundreds of leads, the rapid deployment of tactical teams when there were possible sightings. So and finally, the actual setting up of very strict tactical perimeters when they did see that second vehicle really allowed for law enforcement tactics to be deployed. Those were bolstered by, as you said, the utilization of technology. So the infrared cameras that were used, the FLIR cameras that pick up heat signatures of individuals gave law enforcement officers on the ground this tactical advantage from the air, being able to see in the dark, see in areas that they were able to pick up on that heat signature. But a critical key component of this apprehension really came through with a breakthrough from the private sector, the public's assistance in the utilization of this trail camera, raising awareness that there was an image on the trail camera from a private citizen that matched the suspect's description, really allowed for that perimeter, that tactical perimeter that was established by law enforcement, to really shrink down into an area where law enforcement was able to identify the location of this suspect, call out to that individual where he crawled out of his hiding location and was taken into custody without incident. So this was a successful resolution at the end to a really tragic 43 hours that the community around Minnesota was facing.
and coming to an end not far in the same town where the suspect reportedly lived. Jonathan, when I was hearing from investigators over the weekend, they were sort of painting this picture of planning and premeditation on the side of their suspect in terms of the gear that he used. But when you look at this case now that he's in custody, what do you think that he essentially dropped the ball? He was captured slightly less than 48 hours after the commission of these alleged crimes.
Well, one thing I think that the suspect did not take into account for as much planning as he may have had or thought he had, what he really was not, putting into his calculus was just the overwhelming force of law enforcement that was coming after him. You think about the 400 officers, over 20 tactical teams, investigators from the federal government, local and state officials, all working together. Again, a common cause of taking this individual into custody. The resources that they had at their disposal to quickly push out investigators to follow up on leads, to send tactical teams to certain locations very quickly. All of that put this individual completely on his heels and put him on the run. And that's when mistakes start to happen. In the moment that they found that second vehicle, again, that was a turning point for law enforcement. Again, proven law enforcement tactics in coordination at the end of the day brought this to a successful resolution.
In their announcement of that resolution, Jonathan, Governor Tim Walz said that these attacks, in his words, that they altered the state of Minnesota. In your opinion, how do you think this particular case may change the conversation around political violence? We know that there were many Democrats on this kill list that's been reported on by investigators. Sadly, we've seen one too many cases just in the U.S. alone when it comes to political violence and when it comes to political conflict and global conflict. So what happens next in terms of the conversation around that?
Well, Polo, for a long time, we've been reporting around escalating, political narratives and, toxic conversations online. What we saw is right now is we're seeing this, disturbing trend where, political rhetoric and rhetoric that's online, that's, toxic, is now transcending into direct action. We've seen that now time and time again. And this violence that we are witnessing against our politicians on both sides has been normalized, right? And now we're getting into this normalization of the assassination culture where people feel that it's justified or they're giving a rationale for these horrific acts. That has got to stop. We have to reverse that narrative. We have to stop these violent acts from manifesting themselves where they actually foster online and then transcend into direct action. That has to stop. So Governor Walz was correct. We have to change the entire paradigm of how we actually engage online, talk to each other, and engage so we don't get into these situations again.
Yeah, life altered for an entire state. For two families, though, life will certainly never be the same again, but at least a sense of closure, perhaps, with the detention of a suspect. Jonathan Wackrell, really appreciate your law enforcement analysis.
Joining me now to discuss, Juliet Kayyem, CNN's senior national security analyst. Juliet, earlier you and I were both talking about the Boston Marathon bombing where there was a massive manhunt back then. Things have changed a lot. We were hearing about these drones being involved at the moment of his surrender. Can you talk about sort of how these things play out today?
Yeah, so these sort of multi-day manhunts are going to always use a combination of tools to try to get the suspect. This was different, of course, than the Boston Marathon. It was shorter, even though it felt long. And this combination of use of technology, I have to say there was still sort of crowdsourcing. They were talking about someone calling in the technology with the drone use and trying to identify him. And then the surge of law enforcement to surround him. So he ultimately surrenders without harming anyone else and not harming himself, so that now he can be prosecuted and put before court, and potentially he's speaking. The other similarity is, of course, this lockdown aspect to the weekend. Over the course of the weekend, parts of the community were locked down because these kinds of crimes, these essentially terrorism or terror crimes, don't just impact the victims, but of course whole communities who do not know what to anticipate next. Yeah. That lockdown was lifted there in just a short while.
And what you're saying is significant because if I'm looking at the last year, there's multiple assassination attempts against President Trump, an arson attack against the Democratic Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, of course, the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington. I mean, how does law enforcement start to approach protecting people?
You really can't. I mean, I'm just going to be blunt here. I mean, there's going to be VIPs, senior executives, or at CEOs and other high-profile corporations. But I mean, look at what happened this weekend. This is a state senator that most of us nationally had never heard of, a state leader in the House. And reading their bios is just a reminder that there's all these amazing people, Republicans and Democrats alike, who are committing to their communities, serving their communities. You can't protect every single one of them.